So here's the heart of the build. Everything so far is super simple to do, but not this part. So our original mounting location was up here, a good 4 inches further forward than what we have it now. And the board kept wanting to porpoise and breach. It was hard to hold the foil down. We wrote it that way, but it wasn't easy. And it's all about balance. So when we installed this track system and moved it back, then you could easily control it, but it took a ton of back foot pressure to get it to come up on the foil. And in no time, your back leg was just totally aching. So we gradually moved it forward and moved it forward until we found the sweet spot. And I think this is going to vary between whether you want to surf it or whether you want to long line it. I think if you want to long line it, you're going to want it a little bit further forward. And if you're surfing, a little bit more back biased. But you can see that if you just wanted to straight bolt this through your board, that the bolts are going to be under the rear binding. And sure, you could probably countersink some bolts into it and put your binding over it. But every time you drill holes in your board, and this is a foam core board, the potential of water getting in there and everything else. And then the other thing is the bottom of the board isn't flat. And especially in the center, there's a little bit of a rise in the center. So those are all things you'd have to compensate for. So what we ended up doing is building a track system which gave us adjustability to tune it into the sweet spot for your body size and your riding style. And this has been a wonderful innovation. Now you would think that this would totally destroy just riding on the surface. And yeah, you have some turbulence from these tracks, but it's really not as bad as you would think. And for the most part, you're going to be up on the foil anyway. So the heart of the build is this extruded aluminum frame, mainly built for modular walls and maybe screen houses or something along that line. But it's slotted, and it's a perfect place to put a T-nut down in there, or a carriage bolt. There's several options there. But you're saying to yourself, well, how do I get that to a usable design? Most people don't know this, but even this little 6.5 inch battery saw with some carbide tips on the blades can slice through aluminum like butter. I would highly recommend wearing a full face shield because it sends chips everywhere. But you can easily slice down through some aluminum and even cut an angle on it and cut yourself a couple of pieces. I'm going to put a link on here to where you can buy this stuff. It's only like 35 bucks or so. Not too bad. So probably the biggest challenge was getting these screws in. We were locked in because we originally mounted to this bolt pattern on the foil mount we drilled the board for that. So we didn't want to put additional holes in our board. So we located these holes, and I had to use a countersink bit to force through the top layer and get down below, and then countersink that hole so that there's enough clearance for a carriage bolt or a T-nut to get in there and make your connection to the mount. In my case, I welded some tabs on the bottom of a bolt so that the bolt wouldn't turn. And then I took acorn locking nuts and put them on upside down. I had to tap the nylon out of it, and it fit nicely into that countersink hole there. But if you had a countersink bolt that went down into a T-nut, that would also work. I spent a lot of money on hardware. I almost think it might have been better off just buying the Slingshot hardware with the T-nuts and the titanium bolts. But that's your choice. Now on the back, what we found is there's a curve to the board, so we needed to space it. So you got a couple options here. We went the fancy route. We already had a hole for the fin, so we were able to do this without drilling an additional hole. And my son's an excellent welder, and he just welded this bar between the two tracks, and we used the fin hole and mounted the rear support. But you could certainly go in and put another bolt in here and drill a hole through both pieces and put a stack of washers here instead of going the fancy way that we do. So I know building this track system's a pain in the ass, but you could go the cheap and dirty route and just drill a bunch of holes in your board. You can see the location. The back of the mount is almost centered over the boot. It's slightly biased forward, and that's your critical location, is the position of the foil front to back. So potentially you could use the front two holes in that location, and then the back two holes would be an optional location where you can move your foil up an inch. So I'm using the outer holes, but you could use this hole and that hole and then slide it forward and use these other two holes. And that would give you, if you drilled your board. Now, as I say, the trouble could be that you could have a crown in your board and this is going to want to rock, but you could probably take that out by putting some washers in there. And then you also have this radius or turned up edge on your board, so you might have to add some washers back here to true the mast to the board, because I don't think you want it at a steep angle compared to your bindings. So I'll give you a couple of dimensions here. And of course every board's different. This one has a flared out tip on it, but it looks like we're almost 8 inches from the tip to the back of the mount. But what I think is probably a more important dimension is it looks like maybe 4 inches from center of mast to center of boot. Because the board really doesn't matter, it's up in the air. It really doesn't even come into play. It's all about the two boots and the center of gravity off that wing. Okay, I'm going to include a few videos showing how fun this is. I guess the main negative of the hydrofoil is how much space it takes up in your boat. I guess my next project would be to figure out a way to build a quick release where you could just snap this in and snap it out, and then you could detach it once you get it in your boat. also the Slingshot hydrofoil is damn heavy, but weight is good, I think, as far as hydrofoiling goes. It's just a pain getting it in and out of the water. But here's a few videos. Check them out. What about
That was effortless.